All right. This is the second half. And this is the one that was sent to me by Mr. Garcia, who is now officially part of my mini think tank. So shout out. He doesn't get enough credit. And also the yeoman on the block, Adrian Thomas. So they're doing yeoman's jobs of being a think tank and actually researching this beast that we call Western civilization. But as spoken about in the other video, the previous video, Western Supremacy is on its way out by Paul Craig Roberts. On May 28th, I wrote that the Western world is collapsing so rapidly that I'm afraid I'm going to outlive it. My article was about the rising demonization. Let me highlight that real quick because that is a phenomenal statement. My article was about the rising demonization of white people that is producing a collapse in their confidence. Inculcated guilt is making whites willing to accept the discrimination against them in order to elevate Arab, African, Hispanic migrants that greedy corporations and witless political leaders have brought into the country. It's not a lie, but he's not telling the whole truth. But this is a white elite mourning the passing of or the realization of a new world. They brought in a new world order, but they thought that they would rule it and not have it rule them. The identity politics of the Democratic Party works to the advantage of darker-skinned migrants who present themselves as the victims of the white-faced victimizer. This is truly a libertarian that forgets about the crimes of white people. Just as Jews discovered the advantage of infecting Gentiles with guilt, so have the Arabs, Africans, and Hispanics. If you want a homogenous country, this is a necessary step. Remember I told you that white people weren't too crazy about admixture and assimilation? They're not, and this is proof of it. Psychological and emotional collapse is not the only form of collapse underway in the U.S. and the Western world generally. There is also the economic, check this out, this is interesting. There is also economic and social collapse, especially in the United States. Today's America's once great manufacturing and industrial cities such as Detroit, St. Louis, Cleveland, Flint, Michigan, Gary, Indiana, have lost 20% of their populations, largely due to the offshoring of U.S. manufacturing, which is very true. Amazon, I'm going to have to look that up. The Failure of Laissez-Faire Liberal Capitalism. Oh, by Paul Craig Roberts. Shameless plug, but I'm going to have to read that book. But he's absolutely right. Social collapse is evident in rising homelessness. Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Seattle have large homeless populations that encamp on city streets, parks, and upscale neighborhoods such as Venice Beach. Very true. And basically, gentrification is not just hurting black people. Let's not get it twisted. I mean, it's affecting black people because it's taking over our neighborhoods, but gentrification is also hurting white folks, poor white people. In Los Angeles, feces and garbage, which is very true, in public streets have caused a plague of rats and fleas. Dangerous sanitation conditions have caused medical authorities to predict a major infectious disease epidemic this summer in Los Angeles. The flea-infested carpets in City Hall are being ripped out because of fear of a typhus outbreak brought on by rat infestation. Costs are mounting on already struggling taxpayers. For example, in Los Angeles, check this out. Most people don't realize this. In Los Angeles in 2016, voters approved a $1.2 billion measure to finance 10,000 units of housing for the homeless. The initial cost 3 years ago was $140,000 per housing unit, which doesn't make sense. Now it is $500,000 per unit. As one news report put it, spending $500,000 to build one basic rental unit to get one homeless family out of the rain doesn't come across as viable. Why would they build it in Los Angeles instead of, there's plenty of land. Why wouldn't they build it someplace else? It's cheaper to ship them to Las Vegas. Las Vegas can't take them, though. Among the solutions being investigated are refugee camps and a rethinking of the policy of taking millions of people from the impoverished and unstable countries. Among the solutions being investigated are refugee camps and a rethinking of the policy of taking millions of people from impoverished and unstable countries. We're impoverishing ourselves without making a dent in world poverty. For every person the U.S. takes in, tens of thousands remain. Already areas of the U.S. look and function like India of 100 years ago. That's very true. Homeless alleviation is at least benefiting liberal and progressive organizations who are amassing money and power to fight homelessness at the expense of taxpayers. Rising violence is another indicator of social collapse. Over Memorial Day weekend, 42 people were shot in Chicago. See that? Check that out, Obsidian. It's not Blackistan per se. What you have is gentrification and social collapse. The violent MS-13 gang, formed originally by Salvadoran and Honduran migrants, has expanded its operation from California to Long Island and is now invading the Hamptons. Residents are installing bulletproof windows, steel doors, and safe rooms inside their homes for protection. The chickens are coming home to roost. Another sign of social collapse is growing water problems. The Flint, Michigan problem is well known, but there are many others with less publicity. There are many others with less publicity. Henry Ford Hospital and the Detroit Health Department report a drastic increase in levels of waterborne diseases. This is just a taste of the accelerating social collapse. Readers will write to inquire why I didn't include X, Y, and Z and the health care crisis. The answer is that this is an article, not a book. I said it all the time. What we're experiencing is the failure of government at all levels. Huge sums are being spent on wars and the fomenting of wars, while Los Angeles faces the prediction of a typhus epidemic. That's no bullshit. There's no bullshit. With the immigrants coming in from third world countries and growing homelessness on the street, that don't, because when it was small, they used to have porta potties. And the reason they had porta potties is to actually prevent this. But because of crime, or supposed crime, they took the porta potties out. Now what you have is a health crisis in places like downtown LA. And downtown LA is not a poor sector. It's a very, very rich area. But the thing is, you push the poor people out, and for them to have a place to stay, they would have to travel like 150 miles, and that's not viable. It's not a viable solution. So what we have is a very extremely increasing bifurcation between rich and poor, but that stuff is actually played out on the streets of Los Angeles, and this has been happening for a long time. And it's not just black people; these are white people that are on the streets, living in tents and living in their campers. I actually showed that in Anaheim, where there's nothing but white people living along the Los Angeles River. The Santa Ana River down there on the bank. Okay, this is, like Paul Craig Roberts say, social collapse. For 2 decades, the U.S. has spent trillions of dollars. See that? Speak to him, Paul. You told him a long time ago. Trillions of dollars on wars in the Middle East on behalf of Israel. It's not on behalf of Israel, though. Washington calls it the war on terror, which is a cover story that hides the real agenda and the motivations of violence that has killed, maimed, orphaned, and displaced millions of Muslims. The one consequence of these senseless wars has been to radicalize Muslims against Americans and Europeans, even as the U.S. and Europe import millions of displaced Muslims into their countries. Countries without a homogeneous, look at this, because I've been saying this. Countries that without a homogeneous population are already disadvantaged by disunity. But to bring in massive numbers of people who have every reason to hate you is insanity. Talk to them, Paul. Once here, the hatred is weaponized against white people by identity politics. Even white conservatives can be right. If a country decided to self-destruct, it would do precisely what the U.S. and Europe have done. This is a serious problem. Not Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Syria, Russia, and China. It is likely the case that identity politics is now so entrenched in American institutions such as the New York school system, you read that in the last post, that disunity is now a permanent feature of the United States. In other words, white supremacy is collapsing at free fall speeds. The largely unacknowledged problems that the U.S. faces would overwhelm even a unified country. For a country as disunited as America, it is difficult to see any favorable odds. In other words, the United States was and has never been an organic, unified, homogeneous country. Not by design, but by definition. And people ask me, why do the white establishment want to homogenize black people into an admixture, into the basic, not into the basic, but into the mass of what we call America, instead of having a separate identitarian population or a separate ethnic population. If you didn't know what it was, you didn't believe what I was saying, Paul Craig Roberts just told you. Countries without a homogeneous population are already disadvantaged by disunity. You cannot survive for very long like that. The Mohawk Conference said the exact same thing, that if they did not assimilate the Negro population, it would be the anchor that drug them down to the bottom of the sea, or basically drug them down. The Mohawk Conference said that almost 120 years ago. In fact, they did say it 120 years ago, almost to the day. Whites, people don't. I said this 2005, or I wasn't not mistaken, almost 15 years ago. I said this. I said this to my partner, that white supremacy was on the ropes, and it was coming to an end. Now, I didn't predict that it would collapse or this quickly. I thought it would take more time, but I knew it was going to weaken and it was going to ebb. But I thought white supremacy was built on in a house of bricks and not a house of sticks. In other words, it's not as firm a foundation as we thought it was. And it wasn't the boogeyman or the Superman that it appeared to be. It's extremely fragile. And we didn't know how fragile it was until it blew its own self down. And that is the problem. You know, we should have known that with the two European wars that were fought in World War I and World War II, that disunity, that they weren't unified the way we thought they were. And Paul Craig Roberts is saying that this amalgamation we call America is not as unified as we think it is, as it appears to be. And why we know that white supremacy exists is not there's not a question. I've never questioned that it does exist. But what a lot of black folks don't do is examine exactly what it is and what's happening to it as we speak. This is not the white supremacy of the 19th century or even the 18th century or even the 20th century, when at the peak of its power in the 20th century. This is the white supremacy of the 21st century. And as Cerulean says all the time, it's falling at free fall speeds, which is frightening. Even to me as a conscious, pro-black, whatever you want to call me, black person, 100% 10 toes down black person. Even to me, this is troublesome. Because like it or not, this whole edifice that we call civilization is built upon these sticks of white supremacy, or the building blocks of white supremacy. So if it falls on us, along with its identity or its beliefs. When it falls, it's going to bury it and bury us right along with it. And there was a quote from a movie. I think it was Equalizer. When you pray for rain, you got to deal with the mud. And black folks for a very long time have been praying for rain. The storm is here, but so is the mud. How do we deal with it? But I'm going to leave that, my good brothers, for you to ponder. But with that, I'm going to jump off of here. This is BGS out, and I will see you good brothers on the next one. Peace.